friends, welcome to yet another Renae's Corner video. I'm Renae, and today we are going to be talking all things thesis. So there was a comment on one of my videos, shout out to Kayla, and she said, "Hi, may you share your experiences or some tips with getting started with your thesis? How'd you decide on a topic, and how or when did you know what methods to use, and so on?" So yeah, this is an excellent question. It's an awesome video idea, so thank you. So basically, coming into grad school, I knew I still wanted to live in the socioeconomic status world. So just a little bit of background. When I was in Pittsburgh, I studied socioeconomic status and how that impacts social emotional skills in kids. And so like being in the social economic status realm is like kind of my jam. I love studying it. I think it is one of the most interesting variables in the world. Like I could talk about socioeconomic status and social class for days. Like I just think it's so interesting because it just is like, yeah, I'm not gonna get into my little soapbox about why it's interesting, but I knew coming into grad school, I still wanted to live in that area. And so my advisor, her area is in discrimination. And so we spent quite a bit of time talking about how socioeconomic status and discrimination might interact, right? And so we thought about like, there's some literature out there that suggests that for poor people, discrimination is more detrimental to their health and more detrimental to their psychological health because they're already chronically stressed out if they're living in poverty or they're living, you know, in poor situations, that having discrimination on top of all those things makes them more stressed and makes them more chronically stressed, and so that's more detrimental. But there's also other literature that suggests that high economic or high socioeconomic status people feel like having experiences of discrimination are more detrimental to them because they're higher status. You might have more contact with white people. You might feel like discrimination is a threat against your status as a high SES person. And so basically all that to say, it was a pretty interesting idea. And so that's kind of how I got started with my thesis idea. So basically I made a timeline for myself of how I wanted to propose my thesis. Basically I also provided this to the first years in my program if they wanted it, because this is kind of how it worked for me to get my proposal done in my first year. So in August, I kind of started thinking about like a very broad topic. So like I said, I came in wanting to study SES. My advisor studies discrimination. So it was kind of like an easy fix there, an easy place. And so then I started with like an annotated bibliography just to get some ideas on paper. Like I knew I was going to study discrimination and I knew I was going to study SES, and so getting some of that big picture ideas, things, or the big picture ideas down on paper was really important to me so that I had a starting place, right? So then September rolls around and I continued the annotated bibliography. I have notes because I wrote this down how I did it. I continued my annotated bibliography, and so this kind of eventually turns into your literature review. So you want to start getting more specific as you start off really big picture and then starting to bring it down and talk about gaps and talk about things that the studies aren't focusing on, all that good stuff. And so in my research methods class, we had a proposal due as a part of the assignment. And so, or as a part of the class. And so I just kind of followed that idea. And so that's kind of how I took off with this because I knew I was gonna have to finish this. So then October, I started thinking about where my literature review was kind of going. I knew that I wanted to do an archival data set. The program at SLU is pretty condensed, and it's a pretty fast-paced program, so I only have like a year to get this done. And so I knew that for my thesis I wanted to do like small scale, do an archival data set because I love big data sets. I worked with big data in Pittsburgh, and so I wanted to continue that. And then basically In October, I continued working on the literature review, and then I started to flesh out the methods. So I kind of thought about what I really wanted to do and what I really wanted to know. And so for my thesis, I'm really interested in the moderating effects of SES on discrimination, just to add to the literature. Nobody's really looked at it in psychological well-being. A lot of times people look at it in like mental health, and like not mental health, psychological well-being is a part of mental health, but like look at it from like illness perspective, and psychological well-being is more from like a wellness standpoint. So then November and December, I started polishing up like my first draft about what I really wanted to do, and so that's basically how I got there. So let me go back to your questions. So tips on getting started. So I think having an idea is really where you start, and having like questions that you're just like percolating in your mind. So like I have other questions and other things, other research ideas that are interesting to me. And so you want to pick something that is going to be interesting to you, and that would like kind of feed your soul, because you don't want to do a boring project that you don't want to do, right? And so that's kind of how I got started. My topic was kind of easy for me to decide because I knew kind of what things interest me, but I also, for like my dissertation, I have a list of topics and a list of ideas kind of already like written out that I would be interested in doing for my dissertation. So I think starting with sort of the things that kind of get you fired up and get you thinking, and starting with a list of those things is where you really should start. How did I know what methods to use? I think that was kind of determined for me because of the research question I had. And so I was like, how does discrimination, or how does socioeconomic statics change like the relationship between discrimination and psychological well-being? And so that's like moderation. And so I decided to use principal component analysis. And so some of the stats part really have been fleshed out with my advisors and with my committee, because I'm not a stats person. I'm not even really like a methods person. I just know how I wanted to do this project. And so for my dissertation, I know kind of how I want to do that project. It's going to be a big undertaking. So I'm trying to get it done, like my proposal for that done very soon, so that I can start data collection. Sorry, I kind of got off track there. Yeah, so deciding on topics, I kind of just started with a list of things that I'm interested in, and we went from there. And then methods kind of depends on the research question that you have. So if you're just interested in like so for me, I was interested in how like Black and white children differ across SES in social emotional skill development as they age. So like that is just like ANOVAs and t-test, and looking at differences over time. And so that kind of like the question I had about Black and white kids differences led into the methods. And so I think once you have like a solid research question, it makes it a little bit easier to roll into your thesis methods. Hopefully this video makes sense. I feel like I rambled quite a bit about my thesis and how I got to like the first draft. And then after the first draft, like I started meeting with my advisor more like frequently, so like weekly almost. And then we worked through the first draft and worked through getting the presentation done and proposing. And yeah, so I had some feedback about feasibility of the project, and just making sure that like the project was doable, and we worked some of those things out with my committee. And basically boom, bam, bing, here we are in the thick of things now with my thesis. And yeah, so if you have like more specific questions about like deciding on topics that interest you or anything like that, be sure to leave those below in the comments. Be sure to follow me over my Instagram. I'm constantly talking about my thesis over on my Instagram. If you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe to my channel. If you watch this far, leave a pink emoji, and I will see you all next week. Peace out, and I love you all so much. Bye.